So, with Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core coming out at the end of December, I managed to get my hands on it and play the game, and I thought it was on point. So today we're going to have a little discussion, and I've invited a few friends to come and talk about this with me. So stick around, and let's get some Final Fantasy Crisis Core on the go.
Okay guys, so I have Eric Ladd and John Chicken Fillets with me here, and we're going to talk about Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. So guys, Crisis Core is the prequel to the OG Final Fantasy VII game. Now this game came out, what was it, like 10 years after the original game?
Yep.
Yeah, 1997 to 2007. So the original game everyone kind of already knew. 2008. Oh wow, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
I've shown myself up here now.
Hey!
Good start. But yeah, so this story actually is a prequel to the game that came out 9 years previously. And in this game you follow Zack Fair. So come on guys, who is Zack Fair?
We don't know.
Mr. Fair. Oh, well, he's a very nice man.
The original
I could.
badass.
Yeah.
He's Cloud's everything.
He is.
He is the beginning of. He is literally the beginning of Final Fantasy VII for the longest time.
Exactly. He is a soldier, army dude, and he is all about the honor, as we hear about in this game. He's all about honor. He's all about living that Shinra dream.
You have to embrace your dreams and your honor.
I think he's really
as a member
cool.
of soldier.
He is a really great contrast to Cloud, because when you kick off Final Fantasy VII, you're trying to take down the bad guy, which is Shinra Corporation. But in Crisis Core, you play as the bad guy, and Zack works for the bad guy, and he takes pride in being part of the Shinra Corporation and being a soldier and setting up Mako reactors and stuff like that to make the world a better place. So I think it's a really cool side of another coin.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You do see it from the other side, which is incredible. So, yeah, this game is one of my favorite PSP games, and as you know, I collect PSP. I'm all about PSP. This game is the game to play on PSP. So, what were your takes on the sort of how they sort of ported that to modern day systems? Because I know I got it on PS5. I know Eric, you got it on Steam. And I know John got it in the heathen place.
Hey. There's nothing wrong with it. You could start, I would say start from the highest level and then go down to the bottom, as you would call it, with the Switch. So PS5 and Steam have got the best. Well, I think Steam, you can actually get it running higher than the PS5 version.
120 frames. Yeah.
Yeah, PC is the way to play it.
Yeah, Steam Deck you can. I think it caps at 60 frames, but if you wanted to do anything more, you could play it in like up to 4K on PC. And in terms of like an overall port, it's going to look good no matter what you're playing it on, because I think the nature of how they ported it, they just did like a retexture and smoothed over the original cutscenes with AI upscaling. So like they still look a little bit aged or dated, but they're still pretty clean. But they did a fantastic job with this port. So even if you're playing on the Switch, which is capped at 30 frames, it's a really great experience.
Yeah. So, I've said it in multiple videos now that the Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion on Switch is and I will hold my nerve with this, it is the best looking Switch game out there. I always play on handheld, so handheld is just utterly fantastic. Like, I've made this argument for myself that if it can look that good and run that smoothly, then could we get the other Final Fantasy on there? Generally, the gameplay itself as Eric mentioned, is 30 frames per second, but with me playing it on handheld, you don't really see an issue with that at all. And the visuals just outstanding.
I mean, I know Graham picked it up on the Switch, and he definitely agrees that it's a very beautiful game on the Switch, especially playing handheld. It just runs, which is great. And to be fair, the game came out on a handheld system, so it just feels like it's the right way to play it, and it's exactly the same as Steam Deck.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
But this story though is in its own right really iconic. We have some great story arcs in this game. You still have Cloud, but in a very different capacity to how you know him in the original Final Fantasy. You have Sephiroth, who is a very different person to who he is as well in the original Final Fantasy. And then you have Angeal, and of course Genesis as well. You know, there's some insane characters within this game, and it is an absolutely wild time. So what was your guys' thoughts on the characters? Did you have like a favorite, or did it sort of take you back to the original game and who you loved a lot through that? Because I know one of my favorite characters from this game is Angeal. I just think he's a badass, and he's all about heart, and he's, you know, all about turning to the dark side, if you like, and the other side of life. So what was your guys' takes on the characters there?
Okay, cool, right. So I'm on the opposite end of the scale with you with Angeal. I think Angeal's really annoying because he likes to talk to his sword quite a fair bit.
It's a beautiful sword.
Like, I understand that Angeal is there for the purpose of the character development for Zack. That is what he is there for. But when you have him placed in the same sort of level as Genesis and Sephiroth, I just think he's just kind of, I don't want to say, well, mediocre compared to those two. Genesis is another one where I think his constant use of Loveless and talking in poetry can get a bit berating, but that's his character, and that's why I think he's a good villain, because that having that poetry is always making him sound pompous, if you know what I mean. Whilst making it, you know, he's got a threat to him. And Sephiroth in this, as you mentioned, he's a totally different person at the beginning of this, and it's great to see him actually have a bit of personality. It's not much, but a bit of personality with Zack, and then for him to slowly turn. You see that happening. That's really good from there. So, and Zack is, I mean, Zack's a fan favorite in general, and I think again Zack's character development all the way through is spot on. Because when you start playing as Zack, I always think he's quite childish at first, and then he matures by, you know, keeps on maturing throughout the game and throughout the missions. So that's my take on the characters.
I agree. Zack is the star of the show. This is his game, and this is the telling of how Cloud became who Cloud is. Because obviously spoilers for those who have maybe not played Final Fantasy VII. Plug your ears, but I'm sure if you're watching this video, you probably have. So the Cloud gets all his personality traits from Zack, and you can see a little bit of that in Crisis Core. But the other cast of characters, in my second playthrough here, which is now, however many years after the original release, I found that I really didn't like anybody, and I felt a lot of characters are really kind of cringy and mediocre. Like the whole Sephiroth story development happens like parallel to what Zack is doing, and you see a little bit of that when you go to the Nibelheim reactor and the Shinra Mansion. Like that's happening parallel to what Zack is doing, and you're just a witness there. And I feel like there's a little bit more glaring issues with it was obvious that they had the original story of Final Fantasy VII, and they wanted to double back and tell Zack's story. So I feel like this kind of obvious that, we needed to fill in some gaps here. I didn't really like Angeal. Genesis, I feel like, is a bit of a pushover. Sephiroth is really cool. I love seeing Aerith. I don't know, like it was great to experience the game again, and it's an amazing game. But to me now, it's not without its flaws, and it's very controversial, I know. But you know what I mean? I still enjoyed my time with it regardless, and I have so much more respect for Zack Fair, and I can't wait to see more of him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I will say, a lot of it is cringe, and it does feel. I mean, I know the voice acting was something that a lot of people have picked up on about how binary he is. He's so like,
come on, man.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's really like. Okay. I think there's definitely a lot of work that could have been done around that. But I mean, we're talking about a game that at this point is what, like 15 years old. It's well, nearly 16. So it's to be expected that not everything is bang on. There's some things they could have done to improve it a little bit more. Granted, but yeah, no, it definitely it definitely can be quite binary at times. So one of the things that I did really like with Crisis Core was the overhaul of the battle system. I don't know what your guys' takes were on that, but I liked that they still kept the DMW, the Digital Mind Wave. I did like that they kept that in there because it was such a fun little part of the game. It was very integral to both the story mixing in with the battle system. I thought that was really good with the emotions and all that kind of stuff. But what was your guys' take on the fact that they revamped it and brought it into like remake sort of territory with the battle system?
For me, it made the world of difference. I do like Crisis Cores on the PSP, but when you first kick into gear, when you jumps off the train at the first mission of the game in the new version, and you're able just to roll about and you're able to, you know, attack the enemies like you would in Remake, it just felt complete. It's a weird saying that, but it felt like a more complete game. And you had that extra control over it. Now, although it was like the combat was a bit less simplified compared to the Remake, it still had that flavor as such. And once you got used, I was finding that once you get used to this new battle system, you can tear through battles so quickly. My best example for this was, did you ever come across the mission section where you could take on 1,000 Shinra soldiers? One of the missions, right? Now, I could never imagine doing that on PSP. Never.
It's hard. Hard work.
Whereas on this, I was loving every second of it because it was just so frantic, and you were able to, because with the PSP, it's so rigid. You know, you'd select an attack and he would make his way over, do the attack, and then you'd have to select another one. Whereas this, you're constantly able to run about. You're constantly able to make that attack and, you know, dodge, and it's just more free flowing. So yeah, I think it was for the better and definitely needed.
I don't know if you remember on the original PSP game, you had to use the L and R triggers to cycle through. I don't know if you remember that, and that was a nightmare. Whereas like this, you just hold like L1 and then you pick like whatever button you want to choose whatever attack you want. I found that so much better. Like it just flowed a lot better.
And I think another positive take from it is, you mentioned the DMW. The fact that you can skip these is just it's a game changer again, because with the PSP they were mandatory, and with the DMW being at random, you could be in the middle of a battle, then your flow's just kicked away, whereas this, you can store it and then use it. And that is another great thing where, you know, if you're stuck in a battle and you could store, for example, Aerith's healing power, So when you're in a tough fight and you can hit that and nudge your back up straight away, whereas that you might not in the PSP, it would just automatically run and you'd be like, I don't need this now. So it works better in that regards. So
much more better optimized. Like I completely forgot how almost obtuse the battle system was on the PSP, because I don't know, it just didn't know anything different. And this is like an evolution of the Kingdom Hearts battle system where you can free roam, you can dodge, you can roll, then you can scroll through your sub menus to do your magic and stuff. And now it just seems like a given, you know what I mean? Especially coming from the remake. And not only that, they're trying to parallel the remake battle system with adding like the Punisher mode for Zack, which wasn't in the original game, so you could do heavier attacks. They're more tanky or slow attacks that do higher damage. I had a blast with the battle system. It was really great, and yeah, it takes like the first mission to get used to it. But when you're in, you're cooking. It's great. I loved it. They really brought it up to snuff here in 2022, I suppose, for the release of the game. But it was great. I loved it.
Yeah.
Here's a question I do have in regards to the battle system, and one of you might know. The Buster Sword proficiency. How does that help? I don't understand. I didn't understand it. So, because you know how it had at the bottom, it says the percentage of the Buster Sword proficiency goes up. Do you know anything about that, or why that was so slow to fill up?
Don't know. It was really like I finished the game. Well, it took me 10 hours to beat the game, and I did a handful of missions. My proficiency was at like 0.20%, and I was like slaying enemies with attacks, like purposely, like no magic battles. I wasn't getting anything. I don't know how it levels up. I don't know if like I glossed over the tutorial for that, but I don't think it has any bearing on anything. And I don't even think you can level it up to 100% from what I've read online as well. So,
fair enough.
Yeah, I'm absolutely the same. I didn't have a clue what was going on with that. I know it was something to do with the stance. You could do like a stance with a Buster Sword, and that helped it out a little bit, but I didn't really level it up too much or anything. Yeah. So I suppose that kind of goes into the things that we loved and hated about the game. I mean, was that something that you particularly hated? Was that something that you loved? Like, what's your thoughts on it?
I suppose in terms of what I loved, like it was great. It was great to just experience the game as a whole. I mean, even with its flaws, I just think it's fantastic that they brought this game back, because for a long period of time, like the series producer and then of course Tetsuya Nomura like kind of dodged the questions of Crisis Core coming back. So us as fans thought that this game was going to be reported, because there's also like some licensing issues that they had that was allegedly going to hold the game up for being ported. And of course this was only announced like 7 months ago in like June. And when they announced it, it was like, awesome, we get to finally play this again. So I think as an experience, it's really great. Again, it's not without its flaws. Some of the voice acting is stiff, but I don't care. You know what I mean? I mean, as much as you guys are a Final Fantasy VII fanboy. So even if it is like undercooked, I'm still glad that I get to experience this now in, full HD. And plus, not only that, it's really great to experience some of these 3D environments like Nibelheim and like the Shinra Manor. Like, I've played them in Dirge of Cerberus and stuff, but it really gives me a great teaser for what's to come with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So it's setting the stage even more so.
For me, the fact before Crisis Core was announced, the remake or remaster, whatever they call it, I had been contemplating on playing it on the PSP, but the fact that the battle system had turned me off from it, because I was going to myself, it's just such a slog with that. And the fact that is now, up to today's standards of graphics. And I mean, the PSP graphics were great at that time for the game, but because it's been brought up to such a decent standard, I think the fact that Square Enix have taken the time with this game instead of botching it. They have had a good track record recently with, their ports and their remakes recently. So, for example, with me being a Switch, using Switch all the time, for it to work perfectly first time is something else. I think one thing that if you had to put a gun to my head and ask me something which I don't like about it, it's Angeal still annoys me. But I always get past that. I think another thing which they could have maybe gone a step further with, because they did it with the summons, is they revamped the videos which play when you use the summons.
Yeah.
So if they could do that, what stopped them from doing that with the other FMVs?
I agree.
So for example, the Junon battle scene between Genesis and Sephiroth, why couldn't that be done? Or even the start scene where he's running up the train, because you can tell straight away the difference between in-game engine and the actual FMVs. And when your in-game engine looks better than your FMVs, I mean that's kind of backwards nowadays. Because with the FMVs in Remake, FMVs in there are fantastic, and then when you go into the actual game itself, back into the gameplay engine, you notice the difference. So I don't see why they didn't do that, but that's just me nitpicking, you know.
Probably just a cost thing, I suppose. I mean, like they've AI upscaled them, and Square, they did some AI upscaling with Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers Edition, which was trash. Like all the backgrounds which were pre-rendered, they end up looking like mosaic paintings. So whatever they're using is like, I don't know, they must think it's good enough. But it's still like, it was a treat to see them again, but I would have loved to have seen those as FMV sequences like the remake ones. Those would have been great.
I completely agree. I mean, the thing that I loved a lot about this as well, though, is the new renditions of some of the songs that they did. The soundtrack for this thing was on point. I thought it was fantastic. But another thing that they could have done, which I really wish they had, was got rid of that.
Activating combat mode. Conflict resolved.
I wish that had gone, because after a while, that really, really grated on me.
You can turn it down.
I know, but it's not off.
I know.
Yeah, that's one thing that, you know, of all the changes, because they tried to make it as user friendly as possible.
Yeah.
You never know, it could be an update in the future.
I mean, one thing I was absolutely gutted over, though, was the ending. As much as it really brought it out of me again, and I cried again at the end of that.
Oh my
game.
god, I did too. It was so bad.
Like, it really is so emotive, and I don't know, I felt this time around as well, I felt even more helpless than the first time, because obviously they you can hit them as much as you like, the outcome's always going to be the same. You can't overcome it. So that bit particularly, like, I don't know, I felt even more powerless this time around, and I don't know why that was. But yeah, nothing, we were both, I know for a fact that Eric, you and me were both like, there's gotta be something. There's like, even if it's a 5-second little something at the end, or nothing. What were your thoughts on that?
So, I actually was thinking about this the other day, because I remember us having the conversation a while back, and you were both saying, you know, there's definitely going to be a change here, and I think I was on the fence of saying no. They've said there's not going to be any changes, so if they're trying to temper expectations. But my thought was with it, it's like they've kept it the same for a reason, and the reason is because of that, because the change is in that game. Spoilers, but the change is in that game. So if you play Crisis Core now, right? If you go play that, and then you go fresh into Final Fantasy VII Remake, and you now get to that scene, that game's going to be now more impactful, because the character that you've gone on a journey with for 10-15 hours, who you think's, you know, it's like there's been nothing to save him this time, because we're all grasping, thinking there's going to be a change here. But that's why it's in that game, because you can experience in that, and it kind of, you know, I was thinking that kind of makes that more impactful.
I know, but I wanted more. I wanted more.
I agree, though. It is more impactful, and it's more. I mean, they even said it before. They're like, "There's no changes," and I'm like, "Come on, you know, I get it." But I think on second inspection in my thoughts, I think it does make sense because they want that ending of Zack's story in Crisis Core to be really just profound, and it is. I mean, I cried like a little baby. I mean, I was like, it was Christmas Eve, and I'm like, oh my god, embrace your dreams. But what happens is it's so much more sweet, of course, as we've seen in the remake and integrate stuff, like seeing Zack survive the onslaught, because that's a different universe or a different timeline than Crisis Core. So it's a different series of events, same characters, but different outcomes. So that's what the whole remake and rebirth is playing with. It's dealing with the parallel universes and alternate timelines and stuff, which is just really interesting. And I think this is going to be a really great way to set people up to become fans of Zack, because he's being prominently featured in the 25th anniversary logos and branding. Like, so he's wrapped around Sephiroth's wing with Cloud. So he's in there, which would lead us to believe that not only is his story going to continue, but we're going to play as him in Rebirth in some regard and advance the story there. And Zack's story is going to run probably parallel to the main party. And those are going to be the changes that are maybe a little bit more prominent, because that gives the storytellers room to tell stuff that they just haven't told before. Do you know what I mean? I think it's really clever.
The thing is on top of that as well, in the Rebirth trailer, which is out, again, like you said, Zack is at the end of that. He's front and center taking Cloud to Midgar. So, yeah, definitely agree with everything that you're saying there. You know, he's going to be more prominent. And I think one of the producers, I can't remember who it was, it could have been Katase, who had said in an interview that if you play Crisis Core Remake, a lot more is going to make sense in Rebirth. I can't remember where I've seen it. I did read it online, so yeah.
It must be true.
It must be true. There you go. Source of good information there, John. I saw it on the internet. So I want to thank you both for coming on and doing this with me, because I know you guys are huge Final Fantasy fans, so it just had to be done. It had to be done.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Don't forget to check out these lads. Okay, I'll put all their information in the description down below. And if you like this, don't forget to go follow them, give us a like, give us a comment, subscribe. All the nonsense that YouTubers say at the end of a video. Cheers, lads.
Thank you. Ta-da.
Bye.
Should we sign out? Hold on. Should we sign out the way with the fear? Should we do it?
What do we do? Oh my god.